So the major other contributor to job performance is the personality trait conscientiousness, which accounts for an additional 10% of the variation in job performance. So there's various other things that account for small percentages, but there's actually just a lot of stuff that we can't account for, that we can't explain 100% of job performance. So that's the other major one. Of course, the amount of training and education can explain job performance. A positive environment can explain job performance, but the major other contributor is conscientiousness, how hard you work.
I do feel that I can often read the emotions of people, but my problem is with the measurements of both things. Perhaps I'm just an exception to the rule, but as far as emotional intelligence is concerned, I'm always being misread. I make so many statements which are neutral, and they're always, well, not always, but so often taken as criticisms. So I feel that the measurements of people, as far as me is concerned, is wrong. But more worrying still is the IQ tests, because we had them in schools when I was there in the early 50s in primary schools. We had to do these IQ tests to decide whether you went to selective schools or not. That's what was around in those days. Now, although I was in the top of the primary schools, in the top group, I missed out on going to a selective school. My IQ was too low. So I went to an intermediate high, and then after that we were allowed to go on to a senior high school for the leaving certificate. And consequently, I've got 4 degrees, including a doctorate, plus lots of other qualifications. So I just have no faith in the IQ measurement at all.
Yeah, there's a lot of scepticism out there, and there's a lot besides the intelligence that you're born with or the intelligence that you can potentially achieve that goes into your score. And that's maybe something I should elaborate on in terms of the bell curve, because the environment that you come from and the opportunities that you have can influence your IQ scores enormously. If you're in an impoverished environment, that is going to affect your score. It is going to be lower. These things are not independent of environmental influences. Now, I don't know in your particular case what happened, but certainly you can't use IQ scores to completely determine someone's potential, irrespective of their starting point or the environment that they're in. That would just be complete misuse of the tests. In terms of being misread, it's very hard to comment on a specific incident or a specific situation, but it does sound like that there might be a problem with the expression of emotion, or there might be a problem with cultural norms. That's another area where this research can be quite problematic, is in emotional intelligence, because a lot of emotional expression is culturally prescribed. So what you get, which I can't believe is possibly true, is when you transport the mesquite from America, which is where it was developed and where all the scoring procedures were developed, and put it in Australia, we're not as emotionally intelligent as the Americans. And I just can't believe that that's true. I'm assuming that it's because there's parts of this that really are culturally relative.
Thank you. You've answered part of my question, because I was going to ask about whether there was any gender or cultural bias. So would you like to address the first part, which is gender biasing?
It's one of the only areas of ability where women outscore men, and particularly on the management aspect. They're pretty much equal on the other 3 branches, but women tend to score higher on emotion management.
Hi, I just wanted to ask, what kind of correlations are there between IQ and EI? And also, when it comes to the variations between coping and stress and happiness and well-being, how much of that variation is explained by IQ?
In answer to your first question, I think that the meta-analytic estimates between emotional intelligence and various aspects of IQ show that there's about a 0.3 correlation, and it's not with fluid reasoning ability, it's with your crystallised or acculturated knowledge, your knowledge base, your knowledge rather than your reasoning. So that 0.3 is explaining 10%. In answer to how much of happiness is due to intelligence, I don't know from that study particularly, but I'm trying to think if there actually is a study that just looks at intelligence and happiness. So I couldn't tell you.
Just with those graphs that you were looking at from that meta study, is that using the same definition? Yeah.
Yeah, it is. So the graphs from the meta-analysis, from the Dan and Dana's meta-analysis, Joseph and Newman's meta-analysis, uses data from the Mesquite, so the 4-branch model. It's looking at EI as an ability, and that's using that definition. And in fact, the values are for the emotion management branch. That seems to be the most relevant one. The other 3 branches don't relate so much to job performance.
Okay. On that note, please join with me in thanking Carolyn for a really wonderful lecture.